This week, Conflict Zone is in St Andrews on the Scottish East Coast, and my guest is Stephen Gethins, spokesman on Europe for the Scottish National Party, the SNP. They're hoping that if they can win big in Westminster elections next month, they'll persuade the government to allow them a second referendum on independence, something which they lost 3 years ago. But when all's said and done, is the SNP up to the job of running a fully independent Scotland? Stephen Gethins, welcome to Conflict Zone.
Thank you.
Your party wants to use the coming general election to reinforce your mandate for an independence referendum. But it's not going to be so easy this time, is it? That legendary SNP confidence is not quite as shiny as it was, is it?
Well, this isn't just about independence. Don't forget this is a Westminster election. Now, over the next
this was from your
5
party
years,
spokesman. You know, reinforce your mandate for an independence referendum.
it's about respecting the will of the Scottish Parliament. Now, the Scottish Parliament has already voted to have an independence referendum, and I think the Westminster Parliament should respect the will of the Scottish Parliament. But this Westminster election is crucial. If you think about issues that are decided at Westminster, whether, you know, while we're part of this union, big decisions are made at Westminster over pensions, over tax, the economy, over critically our future relationship with Europe, and yes, over issues to do with the Constitution as well.
The experts seem to believe you're going to have an uphill task this time round because your leader is apparently less popular than she was, and your performance in government has lost a lot of support.
Well, look, the SNP has been performing well in government. I mean,
we'll come on to that in detail.
And I'd happily come on to that. We won 56 out of 59 seats just 2 years ago. That was an extraordinary electoral success. So we won 95% of the seats in Scotland. If you compare that with the Conservative Party, who won 36% of the vote 2 years ago and have brought us into the mess that we are in at the moment, that's something that's comparing can contrast. Well, the SNP are still far, far ahead in the opinion polls. In fact, the SNP are...
But momentum is a different thing, isn't it? If you look at the local council elections in May, they won 164 seats.
Yeah, and the SNP, after being in power for 10 years, went up. We won the local elections, and we won it by quite a significant margin. Now, we're further ahead of the Tories than the Tories are of the Labour Party south of the border.
But think of the areas in which they won.
If I can finish.
Yeah.
Given the mess the Labour Party are in, for the Tories to be, you know, less far ahead of them in England than we are of the Conservative Party up here shows you just how much of a mountain the Tories have to climb. They are still wildly unpopular.
But we've had a little grudging respect from your party, haven't we?
Do. Look,
from Nicola Sturgeon, 164 seats, and the surprising thing was in areas where they have never won before, in poor areas of Scotland. Cowdenbeath, Shettleston in Glasgow, for instance, Paisley's Fergusley Park.
You're right.
The poorest community in Scotland.
And no disrespect to those who have done well. Look, in my own constituency here in North East Fife, I know I've got a significant challenge from the Tories. In fact, the Tories even took down in the East Nook of Fife the Lib Dem candidate's, council candidate's seat at the last election. So, yes, by their standards, they had a good election.
And as the experts of Strathclyde say, the Tory revival, is now on a scale that could threaten the SNP's vice-like grip on Scottish representation at Westminster. Well, they're snapping at your heels, aren't they?
Well, let's see who'll win the election. We've got 56 out of 59. That's pretty good. I'd hope that, you know, I mean, the SNP will hopefully win this election. We won the local elections. We increased the number of seats. We won the local elections. That's a pretty good result after 10 years in power. There aren't many governments across Europe who can have that electoral record.
The reason you're calling for an independence referendum is because Britain voted to leave the European Union. The overwhelming majority in Scotland, though, 62%, wanted to stay. So in the light of that, you say the Scots should be free to make their own decision about their own future.
What we've said, to be clear, is
we've said... Can I just finish the point? Brexit was a UK-wide vote, wasn't it? It was the total vote that counted. It wasn't the breakdown. The only reason you're in the UK is because Scotland voted to stay in the UK 3 years ago.
Well, yes, but first of all, we actually put in, or I put down an amendment in the EU bill that would have meant we had to respect the decision of all of the nations of of the UK in that decision. And that's something that was voted for by 95% of Scotland's MPs, although it was rejected at Westminster. So we didn't need to be in this situation if our amendments had been accepted. Secondly, Scotland was told that the only way to remain part of the European Union in 2014 was to vote no to independence. We were explicitly told that was the only way to guarantee our place in the European Union. And we were told that Scotland's voice would be respected. We've also been told, we were told before the referendum, that Scotland would get other powers like those over immigration. Immigration is very important to us. We want to see freedom of movement continue here in Scotland. That was denied.
Yeah, but hang on a moment, Stephen.
Can I just finish up?
Let me just make a point.
As a point,
in answer to what you just said.
The Scottish Government put forward a compromise deal before Christmas. The biggest document that was produced after the UK vote to leave the EU was that produced by the Scottish Government just before Christmas time that offered a compromise. To put independence to one side, have a compromise that would have kept us in the single market and kept us with freedom of movement. Now, we want the people of Scotland to have a choice on their futures.
Let me just come back to what you said. You warned, Scots voted with their eyes open in 2014, and you specifically warned them in the Scottish Government's white paper for Scottish independence before 2014. You warned them of the consequences of voting for to stay in the UK. You said if we remain part of the UK, a referendum on future British membership of the EU could see Scotland taken out of the EU against the wishes of the people of Scotland. So you warned them. And they chose to ignore your warning. They voted with their eyes open.
Well, look, and
you didn't accept the result. You didn't say in 2014, if this goes the wrong way, we're going to have a second referendum.
And then
did you? You didn't say that. You didn't say that.
Well, hear me out. Governments rise and fall on their manifestos. Unlike the other political party, unlike the Tories, who have had a U-turn on their manifesto before polling day, in 2016, the SNP stood on a manifesto commitment that said, should Scotland be taken, should there be a material change of circumstances, such as Scotland being taken out of the European Union against its will, then we should have another independence referendum. The SNP was elected with a higher share of the constituency vote than even the landslide in 2011 on that manifesto commitment. Now,
but
unlike other political parties...
You're claiming that the Brexit vote was some kind of bolt out of the blue that changed everything. My point is that you warned the Scots that this was a possibility,
we were elected,
and they ignored your warning, and they voted to stay in the UK.
No, they were told they could be taken out of the EU against their will, and they had a choice in 2016, and they chose to re-elect an SNP government that had promised an independence referendum. Now,
this
the
is
other
also
political
an SNP
parties,
government. This is also an SNP government.
Can I finish my sentence?
Yeah.
The other parties may not keep to their manifesto commitments, but I think your manifesto commitments during an election period are pretty important.
All right, here's another commitment you made.
No, but here's the context, which is really important. We've said that at the end of this process, when people know what the Brexit deal, what leaving the European Union might look like, when we've got a few answers that we don't have at the moment, then you give the people of Scotland a choice. And what's been fascinating is the way that has been embraced by politicians across the European institutions and across Europe as well.
We'll come on to that. But here's another commitment you made. What happened to Nicola Sturgeon's declaration a year ago, that if your party can't get more support for independence, then you shouldn't be having another referendum? What she said was, if I, the SNP, those who believe in independence, can't shift opinion from September 2014, we won't earn the right to ask the question again. You haven't shifted opinion. The latest YouGov poll, cited by What Scotland Thinks at Strathclyde University, has support for independence at 45%, exactly the same as in April and 2 points lower than 2 years ago. You made a commitment there, your leader made a commitment there, and she's broken it.
Look, we've got manifesto commitments.
She's broken it.
They're very important. Do you know what I find remarkable? Because when we've had this from the Conservatives talking about public consent, in terms of Europe and in terms of an independence referendum, but don't tell us what public consent is. We've gone by a manifesto commitment. Do you govern by manifesto commitments or do you govern by opinion polls?
So we should ignore what's said outside the manifesto then? We should ignore everything that's said.
Nobody says that. Governments have.
Well, there was a commitment not to have it.
The Scottish government...
You told everybody it was going to be a once-in-a-generation vote.
I was said, and then it was put in a manifesto. Do you have, if there's a material change of circumstances, given that we're promised to stay in the European Union in 2014... Look, you're in St Andrews at the moment. Our relationship with the European Union is extraordinarily important in terms of jobs, the economy, the richness and diversity of our society that allows for freedom of movement and for this to be a better place to live, work and study.
Stephen
This
Gethins,
place
you've
relies
gone back, and you
on
don't
a
quarrel
quarter.
with this. You've gone back on what Nicola Sturgeon, your party leader, said in April 2016. We won't earn the right to ask the question again if we haven't shifted opinion on independence. That's what she said. You haven't shifted opinion on independence.
No, wait a minute.
In this country,
No,
and
wait
you
a
know
minute.
that.
She put that
You
down
know
in a
that.
manifesto and the government was re-elected. Now, do you govern by opinion polls or do you govern by manifesto promises? The Tories have broken a manifesto promise before the election has even been called. The SNP was re-elected with 47% of the constituency vote compared with the Tories on 36%. Now, when it comes to issues of public consent, the Tories won't even tell us what public consent means. People deserve a choice over their future. Our relationship with Europe is crucial to jobs and the economy. You commented on the University of Strathclyde. A University of Strathclyde came out and said that leaving the European Union could cost 80,000 jobs in Scotland alone. Now, if you're the First Minister, if you're the Government of Scotland, one of your top responsibilities is and has to be protecting jobs in the economy and the interests of your electorate. Now, the interests of our electorate and jobs in the economy rests on securing our relationship with Europe.
You want to secure your relationship with Europe. You can't even work out what kind of currency that you're going to have after independence.
That's not true.
This is something that sunk you in
true.
2014.
Now, do you know something?
Your senior people are all saying different things about currency.
Can I answer your question direct? Give me the opportunity to answer your question, okay? Now, on the currency question, if you look at, let me give you some context. When we left the European Union, we did so on a blank piece of paper because Vote Leave did the utterly irresponsible thing of giving no details about what a Leave vote would be, which has left us in the mess we're in. Contrast that to a 650-page white paper that the Scottish Government produced ahead of the independence referendum. And on the currency question, where we said we'd share the currency, share the pound, that came from a fiscal commission working group with 2 Nobel laureates and a wide number of very senior economists.
But look at the different things your party has been saying. Look at the different things your party has been saying. Nicola Sturgeon said the pound would be the starting point. Your Treasury spokesman, Stuart Hosey, said the pound was not as strong an option as before. Alex Salmond, former First Minister of Scotland, has said lots of contradictory things. In the 90s, the pound was a millstone round Scotland's neck, and now he wants a currency union with London, except that the party would be open to abandoning its plans for a currency union with the Bank of England. Fact is, you're in chaos over this, and your senior people in your party are getting fed up with this, aren't they? Kenny McCaskill, your former Justice Secretary, said failure to address the currency issue is becoming not just lamentable, but laughable. Action needs to be taken before criticism turns to scorn.
You talk about people at the top of the party, but look, Kenny McCaskill, who was a very, very good Justice Secretary, is no longer a member of the Scottish Parliament or in government. Nicola is the leader of the Scottish National Party. We set out a position in the Fiscal Commission Working Group, a lot more detailed than the Tories have set out in their manifesto, than you saw set out by the Vote Leave, which has left us in the position you're in. If you do not set out a working paper with all these experts who give you their evidence and set out a very clear position, then what do you do? I mean, look, we're in a situation whereby the Scottish Government got these experts together and came up with a position, and that position remains.
Stephen Gethins, let's look at your experts. The chaos inside your party over the currency was compounded by a leak in March from your so-called Growth Commission, which was set up to build a new case for independence. So it's a pretty important body. Its view was that a newly independent Scotland would face 10 years of economic pain before it got back to where it is now. This drives a coach and horses through your arguments for independence, doesn't it?
We're in
5 to 10 years to get the deficit back to a manageable level. 10 years of lost growth.
Look, the Growth Commission haven't published yet. As you know, the Growth
Commission
this was
a leak. I said it was a leak.
So which
was never denied by your party.
Well, I haven't. I don't know. I'm not on the Growth Commission, so I don't know what they're going to report.
Well, Angus Robertson didn't deny it.
Well, look, he's not on the Growth Commission either. So
no, but he was there at the meeting.
Let's see. Look, do you know something? The Growth Commission is a sensible thing to have, to look at your economy and how you can grow your economy. And again, it's a mark of the responsibility of the Scottish Government that they're trying to plan ahead.
It's there to build your case for independence. It's there to build your case for independence. That's what it was asked to do.
Can I finish my point? Now, The point is that in terms of the Growth Commission, who will report later on, and let's see what they've got to say, the biggest economic crisis that we're facing at the moment, as I mentioned with the Fraser-Valander Institute report, is that over leaving the European Union, that the University of Strathclyde, that you yourself commented on, could cost tens of thousands of jobs. That is a fact. It is a matter of fact that our relationship with Europe is critical. It's critical to this university. It's critical to our food and drink industry. It's critical to our tourist sector and our energy sector. It's absolutely critical to the future of our young people as well. That is the challenge that we face, and that will be the biggest challenge in the next Parliament, to get the best deal that we possibly can and hold the Tories to account over a hard Brexit that's going to cost jobs and be damaging to our economy.
What is also critical to Scotland is the massive gap between what you collect in tax revenues and your public spending. This deficit is the highest in the EU. Is that how you assure Scotland's future?
Well,
how much more pain do you want the Scottish economy to endure?
Scotland's about to go through an extraordinary amount of pain by being taken out of the European Union against
Let's look at the pain that you've put it through now by governing for the last 10 years in Scotland. A notional deficit of 9.5% of national income last year, compared with 3.8% across the UK as a whole.
Well, wait a minute. If you're talking about, remember the Scottish Government has responsibility over devolved issues. So remember that the UK Government has to, if Scotland's economy, you know, is some of the responsibility of the Scottish Government, but the responsibilities of the UK Government. And in terms of how it's performed...
The UK Government had to put 15 billion into your local economy.
Had to put 15 billion into our local economy.
Yeah.
No, the Scottish Government gets a block grant
yes.
from the UK Government
what was it in 2015?
every year.
It was 15
so
billion.
You get, no, it wasn't 15 billion. If you look, I think you're getting mixed up.
The
block grant was worth about £30 billion, but that's a block grant that came up from Westminster to the Scottish Government. So sorry, just to get your facts right there.
Into public spending.
Look, and out of that block grant, spending comes for health, education, local government. Now, in the UK at the moment, I sit at Westminster, where I hear dreadful stories when the Prime Minister and others are being questioned about the state of the health service, described as a humanitarian disaster by the Red Cross, where you've got the Scottish Health Service outperforming that in the rest of the UK.
You've lost 30% of your beds in the last 12 years. You've lost 30% of your beds in Scotland.
All the while,
you're not doing so well in the health service.
Well, look, there's always
30% of your beds have disappeared.
It's always a work in progress, and it's always.
Oh, come on, that's a pretty serious downturn,
the UK,
isn't
do you know something? We're in the middle of a snap general election that the Prime Minister called to take full advantage of a civil war that was raging in the Labour Party and try and quell a civil war in her own party, to take political advantage of that. All the while, the Scottish Government is getting on with the day job of health, education, local government, during the time when the whole government down in Westminster is utterly caught up with taking us out of the European Union.
You say the route to closing the deficit is to grow revenue. Your own Fraser-Valander Institute at Strathclyde, and let's keep the experts of Strathclyde in the forefront.
Yeah.
Closing a 21% structural deficit would need rates of economic growth for Scotland not seen in current lifetimes. It is simply not possible to operate under independence with a deficit at this scale. Full stop. Full stop.
Scotland has a healthy economy. What's damaging to the economy is being taken out of the European Union against its will. We need to grow our energy sector, grow our food and drink sector. They're relying on a single market. That's also why, and this is
getting out of the European Union. This is a deficit now.
Do you want to let me answer some of your questions?
You're answering a lot.
Yeah, well, let me. You're very good at cutting in, less good at let me answer. Let me answer the question. Look, the Scottish Government recognised this problem. The substantial document came out before Christmas time to try and secure a place in the single market, to compromise with the UK Government. That's critically important in terms of this debate. The Scottish Government tried to reach out to the UK Government to compromise over our place in the single market, to try and protect the food and drink sector, freedom of movement. So again, here in St Andrews, this place thrives on freedom of movement, whereby people can come from around the European Union, live and work here, in the same way that I benefited from freedom of movement and I was able to go and work elsewhere in the European Union. Why shouldn't young people and others have the benefits that I once had to go and work there? The Scottish Government tried to reach a compromise. Now, I think that in the dire situation that we're in terms of our relationship with Europe, reaching out that hand, putting together a body of work that, with a number of experts from a cross-party group, we even had members of other...
the Brexit minister, said was a good piece of work, and they were considering it, and you jumped the gun and decided to go for independence anyway.
That's not true.
That's what he says. Look, that's what he says.
Look, David Davis had months
They wanted
to get back.
discuss it with you, and you jumped the gun and hurried off
They
and announced you were going for another referendum.
They had months and months to discuss it. In the end, they said the plans, they came up with the plans were unworkable based on nothing. Now, it took them months to get back to the Scottish Government. The Scottish Government reached out, sought to compromise, and that was not reciprocated. If you're going to compromise, if you're going to try and work together, it's a two-way process. And the UK government has not learned the art of compromise. Now, one thing that I've noticed at Westminster is that democracy, and I've said this in the House of Commons, democracy no longer in the UK begins and ends in the Houses of Parliament. We have devolved administrations, local governments. One of the problems why people feel disconnected between Westminster and the electorate at large is because of this idea that democracy begins and ends there. It does not.
Stephen Gethins, standing up for Scotland's interests. This is your slogan.
Standing up for Scotland.
With the worst education results that Scotland has ever scored in international tests. You think that's standing up for Scotland, offering a third-class future to your future generations?
Do you know what I think is stronger for Scotland? Is that
no, can you
right now?
I'm education figures?
Can you let me answer? Being stronger for Scotland means that right now, John Swinney, the Deputy First Minister, is focusing on education. £120 million he's put into a national attainment fund. All of this at a time when the Scottish Government's budget will be cut by £3 billion. Now, right now,
why did you let it get so bad?
Instead of exploiting a civil war, the education system in Scotland is still very, very good. Look, we're also factors. We're in the university where Scottish students can have free tuition, so it's based on the ability to learn and not the ability to pay.
Keir Bloomer, who chairs a school reform commission, said it's no longer credible to describe Scottish education as world-leading. In 2000, he said Scotland's results were well above the OECD average in all three of the major subjects. Now they're not above average in any of them, and you insist on saying that Scotland's education is fine.
No, I'm not. What I'm saying is that right now, the Scottish Education Secretary is focusing on the job of improving education in Scotland, in the teeth of a £3 billion cut to public services from the government at Westminster. Now, he is focused on the job in hand. At the same time, we have a Westminster government who, instead of tackling the very significant problems that they have, are in the middle of making the most of a Labour Party civil war for political gain, and at the most of having to deal with Brexit and not telling anybody what it means. Now, that is the contrast.
The Education Minister says the fact that the SNP has been so obsessed with independent has made it take its eye off the ball where education is concerned.
Well, the shadow
Parents will rightly wonder what on earth Nicola Sturgeon's government's been doing for the last 10 years.
Do you know what's very striking when you have these debates is the number of times that the Tories and Labour and the Liberal Democrats talk about independence. You have a government at Holyrood who are getting on with the job at the moment, as they should. You know, all governments face a challenge. They're getting on with the job at a time when their budget is being cut very, very significantly. All of this at a time when we're headed towards a hard Tory Brexit that will impact on each and every one of us in the UK. And you talk about education, and I think the way my education benefited from freedom of movement, from Erasmus, all of these areas.
These are lousy figures. They are lousy figures, aren't they?
The Scottish Education Secretary is getting on with the job in hand at the moment.
Okay, before we run out of time, even if you get independence, what makes you think the EU would want you?
Scotland is a net contributor to the EU with its best energy resources, some of its best food and drink resources. You've had politicians such as, Guy Verhofstadt and Juncker who are talking about Scotland and respecting the will of the people of Scotland.
But that's all of
that support.
Nothing concrete. You went looking for concrete support.
Wait a minute. Scotland has been a member, and there was a letter. The letter that came out. That's not true. A letter came out just a few weeks ago from 50 politicians from across Europe saying Scotland, you'd be welcome. Secondly, and it's not just about that.
Spain didn't welcome you, did it?
Well, actually, the Foreign Minister of Spain just a few weeks ago, and you've clearly missed this, came out and said, of course, Spain wouldn't veto Scotland if it went for independence.
It says Spain supports the integrity of the UK and doesn't encourage secessions or divisions in any of the member states. We prefer things to stay as they are. That's what the Spanish Foreign Minister did say. If you want the facts, that's what he said.
Your notes are a little bit out of date. The Spanish had moved on in their position. Now, Scotland is, let's get back to facts here. Scotland has been a member of the European Union for over 40 years. We have met all of the acquis communautaire. Why at a time when when Europe is trying to embrace countries like Montenegro, would it not embrace a country that has been at the heart of Europe for over 1,000 years, that's met all the rules and regulations?
They can send you to the back of the queue.
They're not going to send us.
You don't know that. You have no concrete assurances.
There is no such
that all
thing
27 countries will accept you, and all 27 countries have to vote on each new member.
There is no such thing as a queue in Europe. Turkey applied to joined the queue before half of the members who are currently members had even got the application forms in. There is no such thing as a queue in Europe. You need to park that.
Stephen Gethins, it's been good to have you on Conflict
Thank
Zone.
you.
Thank you very much indeed.